Welcome to Love in Real Time, the only podcast where real love stories meet original music. I'm your host. Tonight we're talking about second chances. The loves you almost lost, the people you almost missed, and the moment everything changed. Stay until the end because tonight's songs were written for exactly these moments.
Imagine you are getting ready for a first date. You're a little nervous, you're checking your hair in the mirror. And right next to that mirror is a framed, very prominent photograph of your date's deceased wife.
Oh, yeah. For a lot of people, that sounds like an immediate deal breaker,
Yeah,
right? Like a huge sign that the person is just still totally anchored to the past.
exactly. But as we're going to explore today, for thousands of people navigating life after a loss, that framed photo isn't a red flag at all. It is actually the ultimate green light.
It really is. It completely upends our conventional wisdom about, how relationships are supposed to work.
Yeah.
Because we are culturally conditioned to expect this clean slate when a new romance begins. But when mortality enters the picture, a clean slate is just entirely impossible.
And honestly, it's a chapter of the human experience we just actively avoid talking about. Society's obsessed with love stories. Just look at the fact that the Modern Love podcast hit #1 on Apple Podcasts right after its debut back in January 2016. We love the beginnings of love stories.
We really do.
But today, we are doing a deep dive into the messy, complicated, and honestly deeply profound chapters that happen after a devastating loss. And we have a really compelling stack of sources to guide us today.
We do, yeah. Some really fascinating material.
Yeah, so we're pulling from a Psychology Today analysis of the reality show The Golden Bachelor. We're also looking at some practical guidance from the relationship platform Bonobology, examining a highly revealing data set from a Ballard Duran funeral home blog post, and finally reading through a collection of raw, unfiltered Reddit confessions from widows, widowers, and grieving friends.
And the experiences detailed in these sources, they're going to challenge a lot of assumptions for you. They force us to look at the mechanics of human resilience, not as some abstract concept, but as a really practical daily reality.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to deconstruct those persistent myths around grief, to look closely at how human beings actually process the unthinkable, and to answer the ultimate question, how does the human heart make room for new love without erasing the past? Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, we really can't understand how a person opens up to someone new until we dismantle a massive collective misunderstanding about grief itself.
Right.
We all know that culturally ubiquitous Kubler-Ross framework, right? The famous 5 stages of grief.
Oh, sure, yeah. Denial, anger, bargaining, all of that.
Exactly. It is ingrained in everything from therapy to pop culture. Yeah. But the Ballard Duran funeral home blog points out a fundamental flaw in how we actually use it.
A flaw? Like what kind of flaw?
Well, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross introduced those stages back in 1969, specifically to describe the psychological process of patients who are facing their own terminal illness.
Wait, really? They were meant for the dying, not for the living who are left behind.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We have spent half a century applying a framework designed for the dying to judge the emotional progress of the grieving.
Wow.
And the clinical data highlights just how ineffective that is. The blog actually cites a 2002 study tracking people before and after the death of their spouses. Do you know how many of those grieving individuals actually followed that neat 5-stage Kubler-Ross trajectory?
I guess maybe half?
11%.
11%? Are you kidding? So nearly 90% of people are experiencing something that completely defies the model we constantly push on them.
Yeah, exactly. And an earlier study from 1981 confirms this too, showing that the physical and emotional stress of widowhood persists for years and hits at entirely random intervals. No one is just checking off boxes and graduating from one stage to the next.
So grief isn't a neat staircase you climb. It's more like a random weather system that just rolls in and completely drenches you when you least expect it.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
And the Psychology Today analysis of The Golden Bachelor actually provides a surprisingly raw example of this weather system in action. For anyone who missed it, Jerry Turner is a 72-year-old widower whose wife Toni passed away very suddenly from a bacterial infection after 42 years of marriage.
Right, a huge loss.
Yeah, and there is a moment where Jerry describes simply walking past a bakery. He catches the smell of cinnamon rolls, and he is just instantly paralyzed because Toni used to bake them every Christmas. That flash of grief just ambushed him on a random Tuesday.
Which is a brilliant illustration of how sensory memory operates. The brain binds deep emotional significance to olfactory cues, so the smell of cinnamon bypasses logic and triggers the exact same neurological pain as the day she died.
Wow.
And the show demonstrated how unpredictable this is across the board, honestly.
Oh, especially with the group dates. I mean, picture this. Reality TV producers, in their infinite wisdom, decide a mock photo shoot is a great group date for a cast of women aged 60 to 75, many of whom are widows.
Naturally.
Right. So most of the women are having a blast, hamming it up in biker jackets and mini dresses. But a 60-year-old contestant named Nancy is given a demure white lace gown to wear, and she just completely breaks down sobbing. The physical sensation of putting on a wedding dress violently yanked her back 36 years to her wedding day with her late husband. It's a slightly unhinged television setup, sure, but it produced a very real, devastating reaction.
It really did. But if there are no predictable stages, let's look at the underlying mechanics of what we do when those unpredictable storms hit.
Yeah, I was going to ask, if there are no stages, is coping just total chaos? How are we actually supposed to process this?
Well, what's fascinating here is that it's not just total chaos. People develop distinct strategies to survive it. The Psychology Today piece outlines the two primary ways widows and widowers process this reality.
Okay, what are they?
The first is problem-focused coping. This is highly actionable. You identify the source of your immediate suffering, which is usually the crushing isolation, and you attack it.
Like finding things to do.
Exactly. You force yourself to join a club, you volunteer, or, in Jerry's case, you agree to be the lead on a national reality dating show. You fight the void with momentum.
So you're basically trying to outrun the silence in the house.
In a way, yes. The second strategy is emotion-focused coping. This isn't about changing your external circumstances. It's about actively managing your internal neurological response to the loss.
Got it.
You can't bring your partner back, so you deliberately talk through the trauma with friends, or you intentionally recall happy memories to release dopamine and counteract the despair. The research suggests both mechanisms are highly functional.
That makes sense. Are there any unproductive ways?
Yeah, the only universally destructive response is attempting to dull the central nervous system entirely with substances, which just freezes the grief in place.
Wow. But assuming someone is utilizing those functional coping mechanisms and they actually reach a point where they feel ready to invite a new person into their life, we hit a massive psychological wall.
We really do.
Because if we accept that grief is a lifelong weather system, how do you physically and emotionally ask someone new to stand in the rain with you? Does the old love need to be packed away in a box?
That's the big question.
I was reading through the widowers community on Reddit, and there was this incredibly vulnerable post from a user asking how to compartmentalize their grief. They were terrified that feeling love for a new person would require them to pack their late partner away.
It's a fear rooted in the idea of emotional scarcity. The belief that you only have so much capacity, and to give to Peter, you have to rob Paul.
Right.
The responses from that community fundamentally reject the premise of compartmentalization.
They really do. There was one response from a widower that just stopped me in my tracks. He had lost his wife of over 4 years. A year or so later, he met and eventually married a woman who had also lost her husband.
Okay.
And instead of pretending their pasts didn't exist, they took a picture of the man she lost and a picture of the woman he lost, and they framed them side by side on the living room mantel. They didn't pack the old love away. They literally built their new home around it.
That is beautiful. And that visual of the photos on the mantle aligns perfectly with the clinical advice we see in the bonobology source. When navigating a relationship after a profound loss, they outline a few non-negotiable boundaries.
Like what?
First, the new partner must understand they are never a replacement. But equally important, the surviving spouse cannot idealize the deceased partner.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, when someone dies, there is a natural psychological tendency to scrub away their flaws and put them on an impossible pedestal. You simply cannot hold a living, breathing, flawed new partner to the standard of a ghost.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that completely redefines how we think about the capacity of the human heart. Love isn't a hard drive where you have to delete old files to free up space for a new partner.
Exactly.
It's more like a muscle. The more you've used it in the past, the more capacity it has to stretch and carry something new without snapping. It's an abundant, renewable resource, not a finite pie.
That's a vital distinction. If we connect this to the bigger picture, one of the widowers on Reddit crystallized this by saying the goal is moving forward, not moving on.
Moving forward, not moving on. I love that.
Right. Moving on implies a severing of ties. You leave the person behind in the past and walk away. Moving forward acknowledges that the person you lost helped shape the muscle of your heart, and you are taking that expanded capacity with you into the next chapter. You integrate them.
But, recognizing that love is a muscle doesn't mean everyone has the exact same reflex to start flexing it again. There is a rather brutal demographic reality to who actually takes that step first.
The numbers from the Ballard Duran blog are just staggering on this front. If you look at the data, 25 months after the loss of a spouse, 61% of men are in a new relationship.
Wow.
For women, that number is only 19%.
I have to admit, my initial knee-jerk reaction to that statistic, and I suspect I'm not alone here, is that men are simply callous, or they're rushing it, just looking for a new caretaker. Is that really what's happening?
It is incredibly tempting to view it through that cynical lens, I know. But the mechanics of male socialization tell a much darker and more tragic story. Society conditions men and women very differently when it comes to building emotional infrastructure.
In what way?
Well, women typically cultivate diverse networks of close, emotionally intimate friends. Men, generally speaking, do not. For many married men, their wife is their sole confidant, their social planner, and their entire emotional support system.
Oh, wow. So when the wife passes away, a widower isn't just grieving a romantic partner. His entire emotional supply chain has been severed overnight.
Absolute isolation, and that profound loneliness acts as a biological catalyst. It propels widowers back into the dating world, not out of a lack of love for their late wife, but as a sheer survival mechanism to find connection again.
That makes so much sense.
And statistically, it is a highly effective coping strategy for them. Men who remarry after the death of a spouse report drastically lower levels of depression and much higher overall life satisfaction than those who remain single.
But whether it's a widower driven by isolation or a widow who finally feels ready, entering the dating pool later in life comes with a unique set of tripwires. The Psychology Today piece highlights how adult children play a massive role in this ecosystem.
They really do. It's a hugely complicated dynamic.
Yeah, they can be the ultimate catalyst like Jerry Turner's daughters, who literally pushed him to apply for the Golden Bachelor because they saw his isolation and wanted him to be happy. Or they can become a massive hurdle.
Because the adult children are dealing with their own grief, right? And seeing a surviving parent date can feel like a profound betrayal of the deceased parent.
Right, like they're being replaced.
Exactly. They often project their anxieties onto the new partner, fearing that this stranger is a scammer after the family inheritance, or that the surviving parent is somehow erasing their family history. It requires an intense amount of diplomatic communication to merge a new partner into an existing grieving family structure.
Well, we've been talking a lot about mortality pushing people forward into new relationships. But the sources also show how mortality has this terrifying power to violently pull us backward. When the clock starts running out, the echoes of past love can be deafening.
That is so true.
There are two incredible stories from the Archer Off My Chest subreddit that illustrate this perfectly. What about loves from our past that return when mortality is on the line?
Let's look at the first one, because it really demonstrates how grief and guilt intertwine over decades.
Right. So a user posts about her mother, who died of cancer when the poster was just 3 years old. The mother is buried in the cemetery of their childhood church. Recently, the local pastor contacts the family with a bizarre update.
Oh, the graveyard visits.
Yes, a completely random man has been visiting the mother's grave every single week. He even stood quietly in the back during the grandmother's funeral a few years prior. The family has no idea who this guy is.
A total phantom, just showing up for years.
Completely. But he eventually confessed his identity to the pastor. He was the mother's ex-fiancé from over 40 years ago. Long before she ever met her husband, she was engaged to this man.
Wow, 40 years.
Yeah, but he struggled with severe alcoholism, ended up cheating on her with his boss, and she broke off the engagement. The pastor revealed that this man had recently gotten sober, and the moment he achieved sobriety, the weekly graveyard visits began.
When you analyze the mechanics of a 12-step recovery program like AA, One of the most critical and agonizing steps is making direct amends to the people you have harmed.
Right, making amends.
This man is carrying the psychological weight of profoundly betraying a woman 4 decades ago.
Mm.
Because she died young, he is robbed of the opportunity to look her in the eye and apologize. So visiting that grave every week is his way of doing the emotional labor.
He's essentially making amends to a ghost.
Exactly. Trying to find a mechanism for his own closure when the other party can no longer speak.
It's haunting to think about someone carrying that specific regret for 40 years. And the second Reddit story shows us the other side of that coin. What happens when the ghost from your past is still alive and they are the one reaching out?
This one is just as intense.
It is. A woman writes that her high school sweetheart, her very first love, who she hasn't seen in nearly 40 years, suddenly contacted her. They had broken up decades ago because he joined the military and he married someone else shortly after.
Right.
Now, they're both in their late 50s or 60s. She is divorced and he is still married, but he reached out because he has just received a bad terminal cancer diagnosis.
Facing the absolute certainty of his own death, his instinct is to reach backward to a time when he was young, healthy, and experiencing his first profound connection.
Exactly. And she writes that they ended up talking on the phone for hours. She admits that hearing his voice gave her butterflies, that it felt like no time had passed at all. He begs to see her. He wants to look at her one last time before he dies, and she refuses.
This raises an important question about how trauma shapes our boundaries. When you look at the psychological framing there, why does she deny a dying man his final request?
Because she intimately knows the catastrophic, agonizing pain of being the spouse who is betrayed. She explains that her own marriage ended because her husband had an affair.
Ah, so she's been on the other side of it.
Yes. So even though she desperately wants to hug her first love one last time, she refuses to be a participant in anything that might hurt his current wife. She chose to pray for his health from a distance rather than disrupt a stranger's marriage for the sake of nostalgia.
That is an astonishing level of emotional discipline.
Mm.
Even with the ticking clock of a terminal diagnosis staring her in the face,
Yeah.
she elevates empathy for a woman she has never met over her own desire for romantic closure.
Yeah, she protects the stranger.
It's a stark reminder that while love might be an infinite resource, it does not give us a free pass to create collateral damage in other people's lives.
It really grounds the whole discussion. You know, whether you are listening to this deep dive because you're prepping for a relationship, or you're trying to support a grieving friend, or you're just trying to understand human resilience, these sources prove that love and grief are completely entangled. They aren't linear.
No, not at all.
And sometimes we don't get the luxury of a 40-year warning. There was one last Reddit story that really stripped away the illusion of time for me, grounding the emotional stakes.
The post about the college roommate, right?
Yeah. A user shared that she had been meaning to visit her old college roommate for years, but life does what life does. She got busy, she made excuses, she figured there was always next year.
We all do that.
Right. They finally managed to grab a quick dinner a few months ago when the roommate was in town for work, and it was a wonderful reunion. A few days ago, the user texted her friend to check in. No response. A few hours later, her phone rings with her friend's caller ID. She answers it happily, only to hear the friend's husband sobbing on the other end. Her friend had just died, completely out of nowhere, at 41 years old, from an undiagnosed autoimmune disease.
It forces us to confront the terrifying distinction between anticipated loss, where you have the runway to say your goodbyes to make your amends, and catastrophic sudden loss.
Exactly, like the 41-year-old roommate or Jerry Turner's wife, Toni.
Right. It shatters the very comforting lie we all tell ourselves, that we have an unlimited reservoir of tomorrows.
So what does this all mean? For you, listening right now, I think the overwhelming mandate from all of these sources is to stop delaying connection. Don't wait to make the visit. Don't wait to make the apology.
Seriously.
And if you are navigating the aftermath of a loss, do not punish yourself for wanting to feel the warmth of another person again. Because as the Golden Bachelor contestants noted, grief isn't a weakness. Grief is simply the price we pay for love. It is the receipt that proves what you had was real.
I think that leaves us with a profound final thought to mull over regarding our own legacies, especially when contrasting sudden loss with anticipated loss.
What do you mean?
Well, does knowing the end is coming actually change the shape of the love left behind? Or does it merely change the shape of the grief? We've spent this entire deep dive looking at how the living scramble to make room for the dead. But if grief is truly just unexpressed love with nowhere to go, perhaps the ultimate act of honoring a lost loved one isn't mourning them forever.
Wow.
Maybe the truest way to honor them is by bravely giving that love a new place to live.
I signed the papers on a Tuesday afternoon and drove home to an apartment that was only mine. I put a ring in a drawer I never opened, and I told myself that I was doing fine. I filled the years with work and small talk dinners, weekends that all blurred into the same. And somewhere in the back of every quiet evening, there was a face I never said out loud. 18 years between the last time and the next. 18 years of almost calling, almost writing. 18 years of other lives and other loves, and in the quiet thought that I was done with trying. And then you walk back in. You told me over coffee that your marriage ended too, and you laughed the way you used to laugh at 17. I realized sitting there across from you that the thing I thought I lost was never really gone, just waiting. We were kids who didn't know what we were holding. We were too young to know that time would be this cruel. We let each other go because we thought the world was bigger than a parking lot in high school. 18 years between the last time and the next. 18 years of almost calling, almost writing. 18 years of other lives and other love, and the quiet thought that I was done with trying. You walk back in. I wasted years being afraid to need someone. I wasted years believing I was better off alone. And the whole time you were out there, 18 years away from coming home. I am so sorry it took me this long to find my way back to you. Years between the last time and the next. 18 years, and I would wait them all again. And 18 years of other lives and other loves, and every single one of them was bringing me back to you. 18 years, and I would do it all again to end up here. I'm here, I'm finally here. I'm here, I'm finally here.